Okay, welcome. In the last section, we UV unwrapped this successfully. Yay. So now we need to basically make it so we can have a material where we can actually put the Coca-Cola logo or whatever we wanted to put on the object exactly where we want it to be. And then also we'll look at some of the basic painting tools as well. We're not going to necessarily use them, but I want to show you that it's there. And it is an integrated part of Cinema4D. Although I tend to get very frustrated with Cinema4D's paint program, and I usually go to Photoshop, or the other option would be exporting this model to Substance Painter and using Substance Painter to work on things as well. That's another really great option. But again, for our purposes, we could do it. We're probably just going to do it in Paint because it's pretty simple to do. Okay. So we've got this. So the first thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and we're going to delete the material off of our cylinder. And the reason that we're deleting the material off of our cylinder is just that it's going to generate a new one, and we don't need the existing material and settings from that to be kind of mushed into what we're working on. And also we're going to be making a material that is meant for the standard render engine, not the Redshift render engine. And so let's go ahead and go to our paint view. And so paint is similar to our UV unwrapping view. As you can see, we actually have two possible windows here. We have the view and we have the the texture UV editor, right? So we can actually, once we get our painting stuff set up, we can actually paint in this view, or we can paint in this view, and which is pretty awesome. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click on this sparkly thing, which is the paint setup wizard. Once we've done that, we get this pop-up. And if you have a scene with a lot of objects in it, when you pop this up, it's going to have all the objects turned on, so they'll all be selected. And that's usually not what you want. Usually they're working on like one object or two objects that you want to paint. So like if you say had a head with eyeballs and you wanted to be able to paint the skin and the eyeballs, you might want the head and the eyes to be selected and do this all in one go. In our case, we just have this one object, so it's not that big of a deal. But I just want you to make note that there is this deselect all button. So if you have like a boatload of stuff in your scene, you can deselect all and then just come in and select the only thing you need. And we just want to say objects. We're going to hit next. Once we've hit next once, by default, the recalculate UV is checkmarked. We don't want to do that because we just did all the work of UV unwrapping our objects. So we want to uncheck that. Generally, we want single material mode. In this case, definitely that's what we want, because really we're just working with the color channel for this. And then we're going to bring the output of that into a Redshift material. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And then by default, this is how it's set up, except over here, we'll talk about that. But basically, right, color is check marked. And there's all these other options. You'll notice there's normal, bump, reflectance, luminance, all of that. Those are all things you can paint either in conjunction or independently, right? So if I wanted to paint texture, right, I can paint in the bump channel or normal channel or displacement channel, right? If I wanted to paint transparency, I can paint in the alpha channel, right? And by transparency, I mean like, is the material visible at all or not? Transparency would be like, how opaque is it? And so there's lots of different options in here. But for our purposes, we're just dealing with color right now. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. Oh, before I do that, set your minimum and maximum to 2048. That's setting the size of the texture. And I found that this is a really, unless you're doing something really high resolution or you're going to be really close to it, 2048 by 2048 is pretty good starting place. You can always downscale your textures later to make them smaller and lighter for games and things like that. But 2048 is just a good place to start from, because it's harder to upscale to have something look better than it is to downscale and have it still look good. So we're going to go ahead and hit finish. And ideally, everything is exciting and it should be done. As soon as it does that, if I was to say select the paintbrush tool over here, I should have the paintbrush pop up. You'll see I get a no symbol if I can't paint something. And if I can paint it, then I'm good to go. And if I click and drag on the surface, I'm not sure why it didn't draw anything. So when I started, for some reason, I couldn't paint in this view, and I'm not quite sure what was happening. But I went to my texture editor view, and then I was able to paint on this surface. And then when I swapped back here, it allowed me to paint. I'm not sure what was going on, but this is the tool that enables the 3D painting, and maybe toggling this on and off would help it as well. But so now, right, I can, if I wanted to, I could paint in here. And what's nice about this, right, if I needed like, say, details on this top edge or something, I can paint that. There's lots of ways we can work, but all we're focused on right now is making sure that we have our logo ready to apply to the surface. So first, I want to open up the material manager. There's a bunch of tools that come up, and the view is going to start looking different now. So if I pop open this little plus sign by the material we're working on, which is this one, right? That you'll see this one has an X next to it. That means we can't paint on it. It's not made to be painted on. But so this one I can pop open. You'll see it's telling me the name of the file that it's generated to hold the texture. And then if I open this up, you'll see that I actually have, in the color channel is what I'm currently on. That's the only thing I've got. And I have this background layer. If I come over here to layers, under my attributes, you'll see that I have something. If you've ever used Photoshop, it's going to look pretty similar. This is my layers panel, right? So I've got my background layer, and it's gray. So the next thing I need to do is I need to be able to bring in that image that I want to use. In order to do that, I need to go to my texture UV editor, and I need to say File, and I need to go down to Merge Texture. Merge Texture means it's going to take whatever I'm bringing, whatever file I select, and it's going to bring it in as a layer or multiple layers in my current texture that I have open and selected. So if I click Merge Texture, and let's see here, that's not anything what we need to look at, but here we go. Okay, and so I go to my Coca-Cola SVG PNG and hit open. It's going to ask if I want to change it. I am going to say no, because right, my merged texture, it's not square, right? It would actually make this square and it would distort the text, and I don't want the text to be distorted. So I'm going to say no. And you'll see that this texture is absolutely huge. Now, one of the issues I may come up against, let's see here. Oh, I have to make a selection. Okay, so I'm going to select my background here. And now I'm going to go ahead and select this, and you'll see, right, I actually have the bounds of my texture. It's much larger than this. So the first thing I'm going to do is scale it. And once I have this tool selected, if I hover over a corner, I can scale it. I want you to note that one of the issues is that it is not scaling uniformly. So if I hold Shift, that will force it to scale uniformly. All right, so I'm going to bring this down, and I believe this is the outside surface. So I'm just going to leave it here for now, and I'm going to switch my view. And when I do that, you can see that my Coca-Cola label is now right up along this top edge, and it's still pretty wide, right? It's going around the entire object. So I want to come back. I want to zoom out a little bit. I want to make sure that I have this layer selected. I want to use my selection tool here, and I'm going to go ahead and scale this down some more. I'm holding Shift while I do this, and I can't remember which orientation this is set to. If I wanted to, I could pull this out so these are both visible at the same time. But now I can say, this is pretty good. I can actually drag this and move it down the screen. I want you to note that like it's drawing everything in black there. And what's happening is it just needs to be redrawn. Or maybe not, maybe something else is going on, but my redraw is not working the way I would like it to. But that's not the end of the world, because again, we are just using this, right, to align our object right now, and it's not really the end of the world. So I'm going to go ahead and set my Coca-Cola label here. Looks pretty good. I want to make sure that I'm not doing anything else. Okay, now it might be stretched a little bit, right? Like it looks like it may be stretched a little bit longer than it should be, but I could also go look at my base object or my base texture and see if that looks distorted in this view, right? And it does look like it's a little distorted. So in this case, because my polygons, right, aren't uniform, they're not squares, I'm going to need to sandwich this a little bit to get it to look right. And so this is somewhere where having both of these up might be useful. So if I select my view and I grab these 3 arrows, I can pop this over and I can actually have both of these up at the same time. So if I come over here, I can go and grab this, and now I can just click and drag a little bit, let go, until I'm happy with, right, how this looks in terms of the orientation. I can zoom in a little bit, I can rotate my view, and I can say that's probably a lot closer. If I was, doing this for real, I would do a much more precise job, but that looks pretty good. And now, because it's so small on the surface, I'm going to scale it again, but this time I'm going to hold down Shift while I scale it. Oops. I'm going to hold down Shift while I scale. Let's try this again. Okay, here we go. So now I'm going to hold down Shift, so it should go up. It looks like I accidentally did something. Maybe I undid a step on accident. But if it's stretched out again weirdly, you can just click and smush it down until you're happy with the orientation. And so I'm just selecting this one edge instead of the corner, so I'm only moving it in a certain orientation now. And that's looking pretty good. And then if I click on this corner and hold down Shift, for some reason, why is it not letting me? There we go. Okay, so now I can do this. I'm just like not doing a great job using a mouse at all right now. And so now I should be able to also just move this down a little bit. I've intentionally made it a lot larger, just so it's more visible on the final object. Okay, so we've got this set here. Now we've got a couple other things we're going to have to deal with in order to make this usable. The first is that our background layer is gray, and we have this black outline around our object. Even though this was a transparent object, right, it did not come in with transparency when it merged this texture. And so we're going to need to go ahead and select our background and change this to black. And the way that we can do that is under the gradient here, there's a fill layer tool. And this fill layer tool, as soon as I use that, it's going to fill it with whatever color I have selected. So it made it white, which isn't exactly what we want to do. We want to make this black. And I don't know why it didn't make it. Oh, I set the brightness to 0. Let's put the brightness back at 100. Yeah. So I want my vibrance down to 0 here to turn this to black. And then if I click on this tool again, it should make the entire thing black. Now, the reason I want this all to be black is because we're going to be using this image with one other node in order to make a opacity mask for this material in Redshift. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Now, when I do that, you're going to see it says, do you want to save changes to the textures of this project? You say yes every time. And this is something where, especially if you're working in the class and you're working on the lab computers, if you upload just your Cinema4D file and you do not upload the texture file with it, the texture file it will not be there, right? It will, like, your material is going to show up black. All the work you've done will be gone if the file is no longer on the computer in the computer lab. So if you're in the class, be careful with that. If you're working on your own machine and you're uploading things to, say, some third-party service to store it, or you're sending these things off to somebody else to work on, you want to make sure that your materials go with your objects. And so one way you can do that is if I go up to File and I come down to, where is it? Save Project with Assets. And I say, yes, copy assets to texture folder, copy node, blah, 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 blah. Yes, I want to do all of those things. As soon as I do that, now I can create this. I'm just going to call it UV Unwrap, right? Is going to be essentially my UV wrap. That's funny. UV Unwrap, right? It's going to be my project folder. And what it's doing is it's creating a folder, and then it's creating a subfolder for my textures. Okay, so what that's done is it's created this folder. And within the folder, I have my file that I'm working on. And then I also have my Coca-Cola logo that's been drug over and my material that I've created. Both of those things. And if I hit spacebar and on the Mac, I can see my my beautiful texture file that I've made. Right. So I've got those two options and my folder. All of this is together. And so then, right, if I want to upload this, share it, whatever, I can compress this folder and send that on to wherever it needs to go. This way, everything's in one place and I don't lose any of my materials or have to redo work later, which totally sucks. Okay, so we've done this part of the tutorial. Let's go ahead and bring this into a Redshift material. Okay, so in this section of the tutorial, we now need to make this so we can actually put this Coca-Cola label on glass. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we're going to delete this material off of our object again. Then we're going to drag our original material, put it on there, and you'll see, right, we get the Coca-Cola logo spread everywhere again. But in this case, let's go ahead and double click to open our node editor. And we just need to swap this out with the image that we're going to be using. So if I click here, we can come over here and you'll see that I've got my logo or whatever in my text file, right? This is the folder, that's the file, that's the folder that will have this image in it, so I can hit open. Now it should just be put where we want it to be, which that looks great. And so now we need to make it so we can make that background transparent. And we're going to do that with the opacity. And unfortunately, this image does not have opacity. It's black and it has a black background. And so what we need to do is we need to be able to, we're going to use this black background as a mask. And so to start with, I'm going to go ahead and enter and create a color correct. So if I just type in CORR, that's the fastest way to get to color correct node. And I'm going to go ahead and take the output of that texture into here, and the out color is going to go into the opacity. And you'll see that everything's transparent. However, I also have very, very light text. And that's because, right, red is missing a lot of information that would make it close to white. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to dial my saturation level down to 0. Right, so now I've desaturated that. And once I've desaturated that, then I can increase things. Now, if I increase the contrast, it's actually going to do worse things. And it might be best if I go ahead and look at this in this view, right? I see nothing, right? If I go down to 0 with my contrast, now I can actually see the logo somewhat. It's still transparent. And you'll see there's this black outline around it. I'm going to leave my contrast at 0.5 to start with. All right, that's actually a pretty good place for it to be. But now what I can do is I can go ahead and use my level scale. And I'm going to go ahead and set my level to 2. And that's going to make this much less transparent, which is awesome. Something I want you to note is that I am getting a little bit of like pixelation on the edges of this, right? It's really rough and coarse. And so if I was using this, say, before we put glass or anything under this, but if I was using this, right, on something that's at a distance from the camera, that probably doesn't matter. And it may actually look like the edge of the paint for the logo, right? It might actually work well for us at that distance. However, if it's going to be closer, there's a couple of things we can do to resolve a little bit of that and make it look a little bit better. First, anything above level 2 for this level scale isn't really going to help us too much. If we go over to advanced, you'll see that there's this magnification, minification, bicubic filtering, and this MIP bias. Right? If I expand this out a little bit and pull this over so we can actually see the slider, if I move the slider off that center a little bit, you'll see I'm going to start getting more blurring that happens along the edges of this. And it softens some of that aliasing that's going on there, right? If I go the other direction to negative, I'll get the same thing, sort of, but it kind of like blurs it in. It doesn't spread it out as much. And I found like maybe small values help with that. It really depends on how we're doing. And you can always uncheck things to see, right, how does this resolve this? You can see, right, it really, that prefer sharp filtering, if I take that off, it's going to blur the entire thing, right? Whereas if I have this on, it'll crisp up the main object a bit, but just blur the edges. And so sometimes just having a little bit of blur on there. You can also try the bicubic filtering. Sometimes that is a little bit nicer. You can see this is kind of creating like a shadow around the edge. If I go negative with the bicubic filtering, the shadow disappears. I get a little bit of a softer edge, but I still, right, am going to have some of that aliasing. Now, I've done this before with other assets. And one of the things I think is going on is, even though this is high resolution, because I used a PNG image, that PNG image had some artifacts from the compression that was put on it to create it. When I've done this, and I've used actually like a TIFF-based asset to bring the Coca-Cola label in, TIFF is uncompressed, and I actually took the SVG file, which is like a vector file, brought it into Photoshop, saved that as a TIFF, and then brought that in, and I got really clean edges. And so the question is like, which is going to be best for you to use? And it's going to be based on use, right? There's only so much I can do before I'm just going to be at the edge of the amount of resolution that this image has. Okay, so let's go ahead and say, okay, well, how do we get a glass on here, right? How do we make it so the rest of our cylinder shows up? To do that, we're going to create a second material. And this one, it's pretty simple. We're just going to take our color down to 0 for the weight. We're going to take the transmission weight up to 1. And we're going to take our roughness and set that down to like 0.01 or something like that, something small so it's much glossier. And then we're going to go ahead and apply this material to our cylinder. Now, when I do that, you're going to see this weird artifacting double wall thing that's happening. Even without like an actual light in the scene, we're getting some weirdness. Just a note, I did drop a plane in here because I made a mistake earlier, forgot to delete it, but you can drop a plane in now and adjust it if you'd like, just so that the bottom, so that the bottom of the glass is kind of sitting on top of the plane. But you can see things look a little weird, right? And obviously there's just the emptiness of an infinite void behind us, but things look a little bit weird. So the order of these things matters. And the way that I think about it is, if I was making this glass, right, the glass would be the first object and the painted logo would be the second object. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the order of these. And when I do that, you're going to see a major change in the object, right? It actually looks a lot more like glass now. It's kind of crazy how that little change makes a big difference. The other thing we might notice if we come up in here, and you can't really see it, but right, this is a pretty chunky glass. If I zoom in on the logo, and you can, I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but occasionally you'll see it's kind of like flatted and looks weird right here. And that's because, right, we have very few polygons on here. One of the things you can do in Redshift is you can right click on any object. You can go down to render tags. You can say RS object, and then you can select the geometry tag here or tab and check mark override and check mark enable tessellation. And just with the default settings, I'm going to get a much more convincing, rounded, nice looking result. And that top edge is going to be rolled over a little bit. You know, I could have had more geometry on here, but again, I was trying to keep this simple. And you'll see, right, the Coca-Cola looks weird because it's, right, being stretched through the glass. That's actually the back of the logo that we're seeing there. Okay, let's put a real light in the scene. But what we're going to do is, instead of just using like an area light or something like that, I really want to show off the quality of the glass and things. So instead, we're going to go ahead and pause this real quick. And we're going to do a RS sun and sky rig. And then let's go ahead and render this and see what we get. Okay, so it's absurdly bright. I'm not quite sure why it's so bright, but I'm going to turn on the use non-physical intensity. We could also dial the intensity of this whole thing down. And if I rotate my view some here, let's see here. If I rotate my view some, we should get more stuff, but this is still like very, very, very bright. So let's go ahead and check mark, use non-physical intensity, beautiful. That's going to make it look a lot better for us. If you really want to do some fun, you can click create clouds and it'll actually create some clouds on top of this thing. I can dial that turbidity down some. Right now, they're really dark. I might want to go ahead and delete my clouds for now, just so that this looks a little bit better for our purposes. But now if I zoom in, you can see, right, I'm actually getting a pretty solid result. You can see the shadow of the text through the bottle or through the glass on there. I can see that logo clearly. It's illuminated, it's red. It looks like I've got a logo on a bottle. And so this is it. This is some of the power of UV unwrapping. Anytime you see anything where there are individual elements on different surfaces in different places, they're using UV unwrapping to do that, right? And that's really how you kind of take your material creation to the next step. It can be a really tedious and frustrating process, but it's also really, really useful and kind of crucial for being able to place things in specific locations on an object surface. Okay, that's the end of that tutorial.